The Football Kickoff.
With Sky. Watch every single live Premier League game on Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
Right, you're very welcome along to this week's episode of The Football Kickoff with Sky. All the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, by the way. I'm delighted to welcome David Connolly to the show. Phil Egan is with me as well. David, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, guys. Very well, you?
Yeah, good. Before we get into the big games, and I'm not going to spend too much longer on Ireland because we'll get killed, because there are very big games to talk about in the Premier League. What was your takeaway from the Ireland performance midweek?
Look, I guess it's been done to death, right? But I'm sort of glass half empty with it, really, because I see a lot of good stuff, and I see a lot of individual errors which are kind of undermining a lot of the good work that's gone on, you know. So I think I've spoken before. I think you look at a lot of the goals we conceded outside the box. Queven's let a couple in. Gavin has let a couple in. Avoidable goals. You know, we can pick through loads of different parts of performances, but ultimately, you know, just a couple of individual errors are sort of, you know, I think, sort of undoing a lot of good work. So, you know, I'm pretty sort of. I'm pretty upbeat about it. And look, we can go over, say, Connor's impact when he come on, you know, square pass, etc. All these little individual errors, but I don't think you can get away from what I think is a lot of good work that's going on. And, you know, look, they got the victory in the end, I know that. But I think a couple of wrong starting selections, I think, for the Scotland game, I think didn't help. But I think he got his team right for the second game. I would have just left Malumbi on, to be honest, and given a talking to. I wouldn't necessarily taken him off. But, you know, look, these are decisions that kind of Stephen's there to make.
Do you think Malumbi not being on has an impact on the players in midfield not being closed down, and then the shots are allowed to happen? Well, that's kind of a direct correlation.
Well, I'm not going to pinpoint one thing. Look, this has happened. We'll probably talk about United, but I remember when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, I think Fred was on a yellow, and I think he left him on, and then he got sent off, and it cost him. Now that in the back of your mind as a manager, you're always worried. What if I take him? You know, what if he stays on and he ends up getting sent off? However, you know, do you learn more about the player when you pull him over to the side and give him a stern talking and say, look, you know, because you can't keep taking players off when they're on a booking. And I know he's probably the right thing to do, right? But my point being, you can't keep taking fullbacks off if they're on a booking, midfielders if they look like they were sent off. I think you're best off just talking to them and just keeping them on the pitch. Because
yeah.
I think our starting team and 12 and 13, you know, the lads are playing, you know, and those that aren't playing, I think they got into the groove of the game, you know, like by the second game around. But I don't think you need to be like a kid here and take the players off.
That's
like
interesting.
You did with Jason, you know?
Here's the thing, right? If he'd been sent off and Ireland had been down to 10 men, the likelihood is they would have organised themselves defensively and not been cavalier going forward, and we would have held out for a 2-0 win, because everybody would have dropped back, 2 low blocks, run your legs off, and away we go. It's an interesting kind of thought experiment.
Yeah, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. I did feel like I think we can all agree that he was blessed to still be on the pitch. So you can see why they just thought, right, like he is just anything that he does now, he's going to get a yellow card. And I mean, it wouldn't be unlike opposition players as well to try and entice them into that. Yeah. So I can understand why they took him off. There was a few selections.
Would we have won the game 2-0 if we'd had a man sent off at that stage?
Possibly.
Do you know what I mean? Like, we would have completely, okay, like what we have we hold, that's grand. And like, it is wild that we're conceding goals from outside the box so regularly, when all of football, apart from like this one small group who follow data, are like, don't shoot. And it turns out shooting.
We should be saving them. Hey, we should be saving.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I was lucky with the goalkeepers when I played, but we had incredible goalkeepers. You know, obviously Shea was the main man, and I look at the goal against Ukraine at home. You know, I think Queven should have saved that, the direct free kick. The two that Gavin let in, I think the first shot, I think he should have palmed it way past the post. Second one he should have saved. You know, maybe we're lucky like that. But these sorts of individual errors, like I'm sure Phil will you know, there's not a lot wrong. The only thing I'd say on Stephen's management is I think he's too keen to do what is perceived right So he started Michael. I wouldn't have started Michael in the first game. I would have brought him off the bench for the last half hour. He was right to start him in the second game. But I would have played those that were playing and introduced Michael off the bench to have an impact. But then I think taking Jason off, I think what he does, he does the right thing. Because Michael and Troy did well in June. June's a long time ago now. June's a long time ago. And I think that's a little bit dangerous. And it might be perceived to be the right thing because they did well last year. And I think that's only a couple of things I've noticed from his management. Maybe he's just doing what's perceived the right thing. Well, let's take Jason off just in case. Well, why don't we throw caution to the wind there and think, well, if Jason stays on the pitch, he might be able to offer us more, and I'll give him a stern talking to. You better not let me down here. One wrong move and we're done for. And just seeing it was a gamble, but I think sometimes maybe Stephen's reluctant to gamble at times. It seems like he sometimes maybe does what's perceived the right thing.
Ironically, it was the defenders, it was the team continuing to gamble for the third goal, which would have been very nice. An L routine 3-0 win would have been great to back. One last thing before we leave this, and I promise it's the last question on this. Troy's finishing, right? The chance against Scotland is something that he's going to live with for a while and probably replay in his head again and again. As a striker, what should he have done and how does he recover?
I tell you what he should have done. I've got a clip, exact same clip of Wayne Rooney in Euro 2004 running onto the ball. Almost a carbon copy where Rooney looks to the goalkeeper's left but plays it to his right, almost like Troy did. When you break down how Troy missed that goal, when he strikes the ball, it's under his feet. His first touch is a bad one. His second touch is a bad one. It doesn't set himself properly. You look at Rooney's first touch, I think it was against Croatia. I can't remember, but I almost posted the clip on Twitter because it's a carbon copy. His connection on the ball is a poor one. He scuffs it, but that's because of his first touch. There was a lot of similarities. And Troy had the header. Where was the header against? Was that away Ukraine, I think? I can't remember. He had a decent chance, a header that he headed wide. I think he's had a couple of chances, but I just think someone like a Scotty Hogan would have been better. Players. I think strikers are a bit different in in all honesty. I think you pick strikers who, you look at them in training, but I think form and control and your touch and your hold-up play and everything and your finishing ability does fluctuate with how much game time you're getting, in my opinion. So and yeah, I'd love to put that clip up. It was almost a carbon copy, and you could see the exact moment. Troy uses the outside of his right foot, which is fine to use, but it's the smallest part of your foot. And if you miscontrol it, as he did, it ends up under your body. His second one was under his body. It wasn't out far enough in front of him. And by the time he struck the ball, it was almost under his hips. It wasn't in front of him a little bit. So his contact, he was coming down onto it like a golf swing, but a bad one. You can pour over it, but it's those little details which set him up for the finish, which was a scruffy one.
Can you fix that?
Yeah, you can fix that. But the point being, I guess, in these moments, because I've been in this position where you get that opportunity, and the fine margins of that very, very first touch, being off, that set you for either the next touch or the finish. Of course, you can fix it, but in international football, you probably don't get that many chances. So that comes back to someone who is, I think, finishing regularly with those touches and setting themselves well. Like Scotty Hogan scored a really good goal by a great touch in a similar, although to the left-hand side of the pitch against West Brom. And he got his two touches correct and the ball was out of his feet and he finished really well past against West Brom. And I just think sometimes you just play those players that are playing and they look, they're doing it,
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, we've another game in November, obviously, and then by that stage we'll know the group. We'll come back to that. But it is a massive game of Premier League fixtures this weekend. We've had a flash poll up: who's going to finish higher in the league? Arsenal are on 57%. Spurs are on 42%. Is that are people a prisoner of the now, or do you think that's more than likely going to happen here, Phil?
I think. Funny enough, like if Spurs win tomorrow, they obviously go ahead of Arsenal. But there's been more talk about how impressive Arsenal have been this season, whereas Spurs have just been very solid, and they ground out that draw away to Chelsea, and they're just very hard to break down. So I'd still be leaning towards Spurs. Now,
Spurs weren't playing well, we kept getting told, and Son couldn't kick snow off a rope, and then all of a sudden, a bit of a turnaround.
Well, in fairness, Leicester are a great team to play.
It's true.
If you want to get
right.
Back up.
Are they about to catapult forward, though, into like a period of good form here between now and the World Cup at least?
Well, the one thing, and Conte talked about this in his press conferences, he is worried about all these games that are coming, because you saw they lost their opening group game in the Champions League. This is something that his best spell as Chelsea manager was without European football. They could just go full throttle week to week and they got the job done. But he's got to juggle team selections out. They obviously have developed that squad over the summer. They've got plenty of options. I'm sure we'll talk about what attack he should go with tomorrow. So I think where Arsenal have an advantage is they've got Europa League. So you can take out a lot of your frontliners for those Europa League games, for the group stage anyway. And then maybe in the latter stages you start picking a stronger one. So I still think, though, that because Spurs will be a bit more solid in defence, I'd be still leaning towards them if you were asking me who is going to finish ahead of who.
Okay. Arsenal versus Spurs is the 12:30 kickoff. It's on BT Sport tomorrow morning, Saturday. What do you think is going to happen here, David?
Well, I tell you what, I watched Arsenal at Brentford live last week or the week before, and they were. I got to be honest, they were so impressive in every way. Thomas Partey in the middle of the park picked up everything, like every second ball. They kept it really, really well. They had no Odegaard either. Jesus was a constant threat. His movement was superb. And I came away going, I tell you what, I had newfound, not that I didn't have respect for them, but I certainly had a newfound respect for how they played. They're very aggressive. They were excellent at the back. 2-man mountains at centre half. So, wow, they have really, really come on, because they sort of swatted Brentford aside with such ease. It was, I tell you, it was really, really impressive. Really impressive. Obviously they got Saka. I'd be hard pushed to think that Tottenham would finish above Arsenal, for example. I'd probably go against Phil here, although I really like Tottenham's front players. I looked at Arsenal and I tell you what, they were excellent.
It's very tight at the top, obviously. There's just a point between them. It's obviously incredibly early in the season, and the run of games is going to get even more difficult because of the postponements. But it's very interesting to see exactly how Arsenal approach the game this week. Like, they're not going to sit back. They're not going to be conservative, are they? They feel like a team who are kind of growing out of that, where when there is a home game and they'll be slight favourites for it, that they're actually going to be able to go out and try and inflict their game plan, David. Whereas in the past couple of seasons, it felt like sometimes Arteta didn't quite believe that he had the playing staff to do what he wanted them to do.
Yeah. I mean, look, they've made some, big calls, big signings. He's had to wade through an awful lot to get him to sort of this sort of point. Whether they thin squad, but whether they needed to, bring on the 15-year-old, whether they needed to do that. Namweri, I don't know, but. They just look, so impressive. I got to say that, it's kind of like a similar matchup in terms of Arsenal's two centre halves with the two holders in front of them, and Tottenham then have the same, like that matchup. But I guess for Tottenham, I think there's a few more unknowns for Tottenham. Like, will Son start? I mean, who doesn't like Son? Who wouldn't want to see Son in the team? He scored for South Korea. Richarlison. Obviously, he scored and he was away for Brazil. He looks a real threat. So who's going to miss out? I mean, I think Conte's he's kind of got a big job on his hands in terms of, and a nice job, right? In terms of who starts.
Yeah.
It looks like if it's going to be anyone, it would be, I would have thought it would be Son and Richarlison in behind Harry Kane. But maybe he'll still stick with Kulusevski. I don't know, but it's a nice problem to have.
Who do you pick?
Yeah, no, I think Kulusevski might be left on the bench, but what an impact player to be able to bring on. I just think Richarlison obviously had that unsavoury scene playing for Brazil where someone threw a banana at him. And, one thing you see at Richarlison is he's a very defiant character where he will be itching to go on tomorrow and prove a point that people aren't going to stop him doing what he does. And here he is now playing in a, like, you know, he's the kind of player you kind of want in a derby. I know at times the frustrations got the better of him in Merseyside derbies, but because he was playing in a very one-sided derby and he was on the wrong side, whereas Spurs and Arsenal is far closer.
It's on a knife edge, really, isn't it?
Yeah, if Spurs win tomorrow, it doesn't surprise me. If Arsenal win tomorrow, it doesn't surprise me. And if it ends up a draw, again, there's no real surprise there. That you kind of imagine it's Arsenal are going to have plenty of the ball. Spurs will be happy enough for that and then hit them on the break. And that's where, as good as Arsenal were in spells at Old Trafford, look what happened to them when they got exposed on the counter-attack by United. And you could argue, well, I think
that's how Spurs are going to play.
Spurs are going to play like that.
Yeah.
And they have better attackers than Manchester United.
Yeah. So the pattern of this game is going to be fairly similar to that game, where you would expect Arsenal to have the bulk of possession and create some good early chances. Yeah. And if Spurs can keep them out, then all of a sudden, the longer the game goes on, more likely Spurs are going to get something on the break.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly on that, right? You know, it's interesting where Richarlison play. I mean, for Brazil, he's playing down through the middle, which is interesting because in terms of Harry Kane and how long he stays at Spurs, but it's almost like, you know, would Richarlison fill those boots when he does depart? And then obviously you've got Son and Kulusevski in behind. I think they've got that luxury now, Spurs, that they could play if Kane is out or whatever, that, you know, let's just see if that ever happens. You know, previously, do you remember when Kane was out? Was it last season? Was it before that? Where then Son stepped up and bagged loads of goals? You know, I think now with Richarlison, I just wonder as well whether Tottenham have got that ability just to play. It could be Son as a 9, it could be Richarlison as a 9 that they didn't kind of have before. So there's no doubt they're going to be punching up there, right? But I think it's interesting because he can definitely. I think Richarlison can play that 9 role.
Yeah, and you can then rest Harry Kane in some big games or some smaller games if you need to. And I'm not talking about League Cup. You might be able to rest him for some Premier League games. You might even be able to rest him, ideally, as the group stages go on, if you have to, or leave him in reserve. Just one point about those 3 players. If you play them all at the same time, is the balance right? Is there any way that, like, they need to feel out the relationship that the 3 players will have, even just making the same runs or making different runs? And, like, is there a world in which Harry Kane, who does like to play very deep sometimes, who isn't just a, like, old school Teddy Sheringham style number 9?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think with Kulusevski and Harry Kane, they're both not quick, you know. I've seen Kulusevski live, and he's fast, but he's not quick. He doesn't have the pace of a Son or a Richarlison. No way. So I think once you've got a Richarlison and a Son in there, that pace that they have. I mean, Kulusevski is very left-footed, isn't he? Predominantly left-footed. You know, he plays that role really, really well, but he's a completely different sort of player, and he's nowhere near as direct as Son and Richarlison. You know, so but technically outstanding. But you know, I think certainly the addition of Richarlison is just an interesting dynamic because I wonder at Kane at some point will not be fit and will the wheels fall off? And you could say that for Arsenal, right? If you know Jesus got injured, are the wheels going to fall off for them? Yeah, you know, it could be said the same. And Nketiah, he played the Europa League, didn't he? He scored. You know, would he fill the boots? Well, I think without Jesus, you'd say that Arsenal front line is not as strong as Tottenham's.
Brazil have some good footballers just in time for the World Cup who are in good form.
Yeah, and they're able to leave out Jesus. They're able to leave out the 3 Gabriels from Arsenal, Martinelli and Gabriel.
It's not bad.
Actually, Gabriel, if I'm Spurs, I'm looking at that side of the Arsenal defence. Obviously, Saliba's been unbelievable, and he just looks like he's going to get better. But Gabriel with the ball at his feet, you kind of get nervous. You look at him and you think that he's going to do something silly, and he's somebody that wouldn't be classified as press resistant.
Okay, let's move on to Liverpool. Give me predictions there. What do you think? You said you're not surprised of any of those outcomes, which is a nice way to sit in the fence. And
I think I actually, I am going to sit in the fence and think and score a draw.
Okay.
These games can be a bit sleepy at times as well because it's first game back.
Or sometimes the team is 4-0 up in the first 20 minutes.
Yeah, if we get an early goal, we could. And these derbies, I think I saw during the week that no derby has had more comebacks than this one. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Have you got a prediction, a strong inkling one way or another?
Me, I'll go with Arsenal. Narrow goal margin. They'll win by a goal.
Arsenal are quite big favourites. They're evens for that one. Now, Liverpool and Brighton at 3 o'clock on Premier Sports is also a big game. Every game because of the start that Liverpool have had to the season. Now, they've been away for a long time. So, what do you think is going to happen? Have they got right, or is the malaise so deep that even this break, this little mini pre-season that they've had, won't be good enough for them?
Well, Thiago's obviously back. You saw the difference he made against Ajax, and Jota is back. That's massive for them. And Trent Alexander-Arnold is angry because he's basically gone away with England.
He's out of the World Cup squad. Not a hope.
You'd be surprised. So he's got a point to prove, and it's hard to know what to expect from Brighton. Obviously, Brighton are so good away from home under Graham Potter. Graham Potter's gone now. The Derbies' first game in charge. What does he do? Does he just stick with the way they've played? I mean, he hasn't had much time with them, but it's a game that Liverpool are going to have plenty of possession. They're going to create chances, but if they don't put them away, Brighton are the kind of team that will pick you off. I think back to the game last season where Liverpool were 2-0 up and seemed to be cruising, and then Brighton just kept getting in behind that high line, and eventually they got a goal and they got two, so they got a draw. So it's a tricky game for Liverpool, but I think having Jota back is massive, because Firmino drops all the time, whereas Jota won't do that. And if you look at the Salah goal against Ajax, that was made by Jota, running with pace at the Ajax defence, and he obviously laid the ball off to Salah. It also takes pressure off Núñez, who scored for Uruguay during the international break, but I don't think the plan was ever to have Núñez start so early. This was going to be your classic Jurgen Klopp. Bring him in, show him what it's all about, ease him in, and then he'll come in 2 or 3 months and he'll hit the ground running. Obviously that hasn't happened.
No. Okay, so a big game, because the new manager bounce might happen for Brighton, and
Can you have a new manager bounce with a club that's lost the manager that they want? They didn't sack Graham Potter.
Maybe.
What? I don't know. David, you'd be able to answer this. As a player, if you're a Brighton player and things are going so well with Graham Potter and everyone's talking about you, and then he's gone, what does that do to a dressing room?
Yeah, that can be tough, and I think credit to Brighton, because at least they made an appointment and brought De Zerbi in, pretty quickly, which I think was needed. But the last game was 3 weeks ago. It's a long time to sort of ponder and then wonder how things are going to go next. And I think Graham, a lot of them might be thinking, will Graham come and get me? Am I going to end up at Chelsea? Is there an opportunity for him to take some of us with him? I mean, those that have just joined would probably be feeling let down. Your Billy Gilmores and players like that of this world, thinking, well, hang on a minute, I kind of joined to play for you, because make no mistake, Graham Potter's standing was such that everyone, I played with players that play under him, and they say he's absolutely brilliant. So there'll be players joining Brighton to probably play under Graham, and then he's gone. And you think, where do we go now? And obviously, he is key to how they have functioned as a team, as a football club, as a relatively calm and stable football club. Nothing ever comes out of Brighton, right? Any unhappy players, not one peep, nothing. Players are sold, they move on pretty quietly. He seems to have excellent man management, and you just wonder how that's going to go with, I don't know, De Zerbi, Italian, you can't stereotype, you have no idea how he's going to, unless you watch his previous managerial appointments. I know he's had a lot of them, but there was mitigating circumstances in a lot of them as well. But nonetheless, it's a big change from someone like Graham, who's been there for such a long time, and his whole coaching staff. So it's so hard to predict this one. It's really difficult to call, because I think if you're a Brighton player or a fan, you might be excited about him because you think, well, okay, they got Graham Potter's appointment right. Maybe, this one will be right. We just don't know it yet.
Yeah. Okay. That's the 3 o'clock kickoff on Saturday. On Sunday, Manchester City versus Manchester United. It's a 12 o'clock kickoff on Sky Sports. We've got Nathan and Brian Kerr on off the ball commentary for you on the radio. What do you think?
Yeah, it's been kind of build up as, can Manchester United stop Erling Haaland scoring 3 hat-tricks in a row at home? And this comes back to when Lisandro Martinez started and people questioned, was he going to be big enough physically to play in the Premier League? And that has kind of gone away. And now, like, it's resurfacing. But
since the Brentford game, yeah.
Yeah, but he has played against Haaland before. He was part of that Ajax team that beat Dortmund 4-0. So, you know, I'm sure that will help. But I suppose the difference now is that...
Is there one thing that we haven't really spoken about, in that he clattered Gabriel Jesus, and who was it? There was another game where somebody got completely taken out.
He should have given a penalty away against Brighton, I remember.
I have a prediction that he's going to pretty early try and do Haaland.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, he is a feisty character, and he certainly has... he defends very similarly. He kind of reminds me of his compatriot Gabriel Heinze, where...
Did he do Salah as well?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's Salah and Jesus he's done in like successive back-to-back big games, where both of them afterwards were a little bit reticent about, am I going to get kicked again?
Yeah. I don't know if that works with Haaland.
I mean, it'll be interesting. He's a slightly bigger individual. I mean, certainly, you know, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog.
Absolutely. I think the difference, though, with the Ajax and Dortmund game is that City have De Bruyne, and we know how good he is, and they've already formed a relationship there on the pitch that is showing exactly why City wanted to bring in Erling Haaland. Now, as good as City are, there's been plenty of opportunities for opposing teams to get at them. Now, it depends on... Martial and Rashford have had success in this fixture in the past, but they're both doubts. So what does he do? Does he go with Elanga because he has pace? Does he maybe throw Christian Eriksen into the Bruno Fernandes position and play Fernandes as a false 9, and then bring in someone like Casemiro as another holder?
It'd be interesting to see Casemiro play some football for Man United in a big game, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, he's played in plenty of big games, so I wouldn't worry about him in that sense. But yeah, I think it's going to be very similar to what we saw, the blueprint that Solskjaer had to beat City in these big games at the Etihad, where they just frustrated City and they just hit them on the break.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're good enough to do it.
Well, that's the question. Will that work, David, do you think?
I think it's got a very good chance. I mean, you know, say you look at Saint-Maximin, for example, you know, the damage he caused Newcastle, not a lot of the ball, you know. Could Anthony, for example, do the same? You know, that is what I guess United will be looking for. That, you know, they've won games. You go back to the Arsenal game, I think they had, you know, whatever, 30-something% of the ball. They're going to have the same tomorrow, right? And it's just whether, you know, they can hurt City on the counter-attack, which, yeah, absolutely they could. So, you know, and look, Aston Villa, you know, I guess made a change. When Villa played, they dropped one of their sort of creative midfielders, went certainly more solid. And then what does United do? Do United do the same? Do they drop an Eriksen and then play a Casemiro, as you've touched on, go with 2 dogs of war in there, but lose maybe a little bit of sort of creativity? I know Villa, you know, they had no Buendia, they had no Coutinho. They went with more dogs of war in the middle of the park and battled it out. Now, United are better, obviously, but, you know, nonetheless, I think that's probably a decision that he's got to really think about. Does he stick with Eriksen and McTominay, or does he add a Casemiro in there? You know, and maybe does he take... He's
got to start picking Casemiro, right?
Yeah, let's see him. You can't leave Eriksen out. Eriksen's been brilliant for United, and even see his goal for Denmark against Croatia.
Well, they not play very well together? Are they not like a good... Is that not a good partnership?
Yeah, but I think there's levels where, you know, the Arsenal game, the Liverpool game, Liverpool and Arsenal both had a lot of possession, but if you give City that much possession, they can hurt you a lot more.
So, is McTominay in the team ahead of Casemiro?
Yeah,
at the moment he is. Yeah.
But that's not right. Surely, that at some point you've got to go. Come on, you're the world class player here, and get him in. No.
Well, I think the intention was probably, I guess, either to play with 2 holders, you know, so that would be Casemiro alongside McTominay. I would have imagined so, but probably, you know, how Eriksen's playing and how McTominay are playing, I think it's absolutely right that he doesn't change those 2. You know, so But why has he brought Casemiro? Well, he's brought him to start football matches. Well, maybe his arrival has kind of brought more out of those players that are there, knowing that he's obviously there ready to, he's waiting for his chance, and he's obviously not going to be waiting there too long, but if the others are performing as they are, then, and Bruno's going to play, isn't he? Bruno's the new skipper or whatever. He's going to play as the number 10 in this role. So is who the two holders are. And I guess, they'll keep playing until, I don't know, does one of them get injured maybe, McTominay? There's, a different game. If you were going to call any game to play two defensive midfielders, you would imagine this would be the game out of all the games this season. So that's why I think the one decision is, because it is almost Eriksen is undroppable at the minute, and so is McTominay. But if there's one game where he's going to change anything and deviate, it would be this one. So it'll be interesting whether he does or whether he sticks with those two players. Eriksen and McTominay says, no, this is how we're going. And so this is the one game I think if he was ever going to change it, it would be now. And if he doesn't...
And maybe if there's no forwards fit, he actually can play Bruno in that false nine role, and then you can get them all in the team and it looks like everybody's happy. Yeah,
and Eriksen is that player that just needs half a second to see a pass and he can play it onto someone running in behind that City defence.
It's a really exciting derby to look forward to for the first time between these two in a long time, where you kind of feel like there's something important riding on it from...
I mean, if United win, it's massive. They would have picked off Liverpool, Arsenal and City, and the kind of hope you would have had for United at the start of the season with Ten Hag was that they could compete in these big games, and if they took 9 points from those fixtures,
it'd be sensational.
And then obviously they have to sort out the issue of beating teams that are going to sit in against them,
which
that takes time, but it would be quite the turnaround from losing the first two games.
Having said all that, who's going to win?
City.
Okay, David?
City, yeah.
Yeah, all right. Leeds versus Aston Villa, Sunday 2:15 on Sky Sports. Stephen Doyle and Kenny Cunningham on commentary for this one. Leeds have been in and out, up and down, inconsistent, and it's clear that they have a policy around signing players, and those players looked brilliant at the start. A little bit of, they've had some injuries, so maybe we shouldn't overreact to this, but what's the story here?
Well, I know Jesse Marsch isn't going to be in the dugout. He obviously, he said something you can't even say. Yeah, but he was all, and he was, he was living on the edge for the last few games. He'd annoyed Bruno Lage, and I'd be interested. Do you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if you could still hear him from the stand, because he's quite vocal. And then we know with Steven Gerrard, he just seems like one bad result away from being shown the door. But I also feel with Leeds, because of how much Leeds fans worshipped Bielsa, and Marsh said a few things last season which weren't the most sensible things to say on the record about Bielsa and the fitness and the injury record, and he kept them up, so there was goodwill towards him at the start.
He basically agreed with Karen Kearney, right? I mean, fundamentally that was what he was doing. It's like, sometimes we run out of steam here.
Well, he just basically said they were running into the ground. And look, Jesse Marsh teams do a lot of running as well. Yeah, but I think it was just some of the training, those sessions that Bielsa is famed for. A few bad results though for Leeds, and
this is one of those.
It really is.
Managers on the verge of the doghouse.
There's a couple of fixtures like that over the weekend. I know we'll get into the other one as well, where you would fear for a losing manager.
Yeah, okay. And will there be a losing manager, or does this have boring 0-0 written all over it?
If Villa are involved, it's not going to be an exciting game.
Not at the moment.
You know that, Joe.
I do, unfortunately. David, what do you think is going to happen here?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think for Aston Villa, all they cared about against Southampton, because they worked on the game and it wasn't a good game. It was dreadful. Was getting the 3 points, because they picked up the point against City before that. So for them, 4 points out of those two games, great. Now they're up against a Leeds side who, they're certainly not as strong. I think they're probably hoping that probably Firpo and Ayling, if they're back fit, that will be a big boost for them. Rodrigo as well. So they've kind of they're missing key players. I think Bamford. Can he get back proper 100% match fit and get amongst the goals? So I think they've got players that will certainly improve them and make them better. And I think here for Aston Villa, if they probably get away from home, keep the run going, if they got another clean sheet, something like that, I think you have sort of signs of improvement for them.
Okay, the last game is Leicester versus Forest. It's 8 o'clock on Monday night. And as you were saying, managers who are up against it at the moment.
Yeah, you have a manager who couldn't sign a player against a manager.
Signed far too many.
So many players. Now, I feel for Brendan Rodgers because of basically having to go into the season with his hands tied behind his back. Now, I would also say that he needs to get on with it. And his squad of players shouldn't be at the bottom of the league.
They're really good.
They are, like, we saw the glimpses of them against Spurs in attack, but they can't defend. They're woeful from set pieces. So it's whether Forest can take advantage of that. But yeah, you would fear for Brendan Rodgers if they lost on Monday night.
This should be a 5-5 thriller on Monday Night Football, David. That's what I'm predicting here.
Yeah, I mean, geez, I mean, I know Kasper Schmeichel left because apparently he would have stayed if he would have got a similar contract, but Nice sort of offered him 3 years on the same money or whatever. He's ended up at Nice, but nonetheless, Danny Ward is really, really struggling, in all areas of goalkeeping. And you can say what you want about other areas of the pitch. We touched on it for Ireland, conceding goals from distance. I think until they get their goalkeeper sorted, I think they're always at risk because Danny just doesn't look confident. It looks like, his confidence is completely gone. And that is not going to suddenly improve or get better. I think he's been thrust in as the number one here because Kasper's left, and I'm just not sure he's ready for it. And he should be ready, obviously, by now with his age and etc. But I think they've made a huge mistake here, not having an able deputy to come and step in. And Forest, I think, will be okay. I know it's hard integrating all these new players, but probably might suit them being away from home. Pressure's all on Leicester. Will the crowd turn? East Midlands derby, etc., etc. They've got all the talent, Leicester, but I just fancy if Forest, if I was them, I'd have a shoot on sight policy.
Yeah.
And it's only when you watch Danny do you see that he's finding it really, really hard in goal. So I think sort of difficult times for Leicester at the minute. But I'm one of those. I think they've got a lot of good players, and they will improve. I do think that. Although Leicester have got the worst start in Premier League history, which doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's another good thing to put on his CV. I recovered from the worst start ever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And he'll be slow to tell us that, won't he? He'll barely point it out. We'll leave it there. Good stuff. David Connolly, thanks a million. Phil Egan, thanks a million. The football kickoff live every Friday around about 11:30 with Sky. All the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports. See you next week. Take care.
The football kickoff
with Sky. Watch every single live Premier League game on Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.